Sometimes you come across a series that speaks to you. I don't mean that literally, of course. I'm not talking about a show that breaks the fourth wall or a series that narrates to you like it knows that you are an observer. I'm talking about a series that does things in a way which showcases aspects about yourself you thought only happen to you. On the surface, The Ancient Magus Bride is fairly simple. It's a series that takes some known and some obscure parts of European folklore, adds the author's own twist to it, and presents a narrative about a character who is tossed into this world unwillingly, but with the help of a kind of mentor character. She comes to learn more about the world and to appreciate the fantastical elements of it. While the series does do that, of course, by the end of it, I think you might agree that those aspects are very clearly not the driving force behind the show. It's more of a surface-level backdrop, a pit of quicksand that looks solid until you start to walk into it. And that is when you start to fall. Magus Bride is very much about that fall. About what might cause a character to continue to fall down a very dark and deep pit within themselves. About a character that already thinks that they have found the bottom, and how they may get themselves out. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Okada, and today, on Glass Reflection, The Ancient Magus' Bride. Before we get to that, though, we at Glass Reflection would like to give a shout out to the sponsor of not just this video, but also the Review Week of Awesome as a whole, Surfshark VPN. A VPN, for those who somehow don't know yet, is a way for you to protect your privacy and what you view online as you surf the web. Not only does it secure your data to stop people like those from your ISP seeing where you are connecting from, but you can also use it to change your digital location to that of another country in order to bypass that pesky thing known as region locking. Content blocked on services such as Netflix and YouTube can be accessible simply by using Surfshark and connecting to a local server from the country that you would like to access. Is Funimation's website giving you trouble? Well, Surfshark can't fix their broken website because no one really can, but what they can do is let you access their content from wherever you would like. You know what else this works with? Verve! That's Crunchyroll and High Dive and a bunch of other things, which means that you can go and watch Ancient Magus Bride on either Funimation or Verve. You can! That's a thing! Have at it! Surfshark is also available on mobile devices if you like to stream from your mobile phone or tablet, so why don't you give it a try? If you don't like it within 30 days, let them know. You can get your money back, no questions asked. There will be a link and a promo code in the description where you can sign up for a percentage off, as well as an extra 3 months free, because we like you guys so much. Thank you very much to Surfshark for sponsoring. Now, let's jam. I mentioned that the building blocks of this show's story are fairly simplistic and easy to comprehend. You have a young girl, Chise, who ends up becoming the apprentice of a, by human standards, very old Magus of immense power. Not only does she interest our Magus, Elias, but their relationship is one that ends up becoming mutually beneficial to them both as they learn more about one another. And for Chise, as she learns more about this magical side of the world she used to be able to see, but could never understand. While there is an aspect to this series dedicated to presenting a variety of mythological folklore, it's cleverly used to also help build and showcase where characters are in their various mental states, and how they overcome their unique obstacles. So first we come to Elias. He is a character that I don't really like, and I think that's kind of the point. He rubs me the wrong way, and while some of his actions seem virtuous throughout the series and with his interactions with Chise, his otherworldly nature is very off-putting. He doesn't feel human, which is perfect because he isn't. He's supposed to feel off, especially during the times when he attempts to act like a regular human being. He is an example of one of the few times that I could dislike a character and honestly wouldn't have it any other way. Elias could have been a perfect Prince Charming, someone more like an ideal of what a fantastic sorcerer could be like. He could have been like the Wizard Howl on a good day without all of the Playboy attributes. He could have been like the kind-hearted Prince Zen, but with magic, come to save the heroine from danger. But Elias is neither of these. While he understands some variations of human etiquette, there are plenty of other things that are just completely lost on him. Even in the first episode, this is shown several times with him ignoring established rules of the magical auction, or even when he tries to bathe Chise without paying much mind to her embarrassment. Finally, when he makes the blanket statement that he is already treating her as almost his wife without consent. Many of these things are not how an ideal savior would act, though, of course, I don't think that I would say that they were done out of convenience or love. Elias just acts based on how he feels he should in any given situation, without paying much mind to what others think of his actions, nor what they might want. It's almost like a child learning how to act in situations by reading fiction, and they end up doing their best guess for the situations that they only ever read about, or never read about. When he asks Chise to be his bride, it's entirely possible he doesn't realize what he's asking or implying. That's just the kind of character that he is. But then you get to see the other side of things, where he absolutely knows what he's doing. While human interaction and relationships are an extremely weak point for him, dealing with the magical nature of the world is another story. Elias knows how to be a Magus. He knows how to handle the magical elements of the world, or at least hold his own against the more dangerous aspects. In this way, he ends up being the perfect mentor character for Chise, as there is very little that she interacts with, especially in the early stages of the story, where he cannot be in full control of her safety. But because of Elias's inhuman nature, there is plenty that Chise can do to help him in kind. It's their relationship that really sets this series apart from others, though it takes a bit to get there. The first episode, of course, starts off with a situation that probably turned off a lot of people, despite its more positive ending considering the circumstances. It's a bit of a dark spot, as it were. Our protagonist, Chise, was introduced in chains, signing her life away to be sold in some kind of fancy rich mage auction, only for Elias to swoop in and buy her. This is uncomfortable for a number of reasons, but mainly it introduces the relationship between our two leads as something more akin to master and slave rather than an equal partnership. It's something that the show spends the rest of the entire narrative trying to shake off. Sure, you can say that Chise was content with the situation, you can say that she agreed to be placed on auction, that she signed the paper, but we also know that her life was garbage prior to the series fully starting. She wasn't in a good place mentally, and then this suave British man shows up and offered her an escape, one that just so happened to involve chains. I would have been more inclined to agree with the idea that the auction was done in good faith if Chise was not in chains, that she was there on that stage of her own free will. The chains were a touch I didn't think were necessary. The point of them, of course, was so that Elias could destroy them once they arrived at his home, possibly symbolizing the first step of her mental freedom. But like with everything that Elias does, it's just another thing that looks to be well-intentioned, but comes off as something quite a bit different. Of course, Chise, being our protagonist, is the far more interesting and relatable character between the two of them. While Elias comes off as one with sharp edges, Chise is far more like the familiar smoothness of worn wood, like a living room chair neglected for decades gathering dust. Her relatability is one with a bit of a depressing connotation because she herself is incredibly depressed. Her parents are missing. She's been mistreated by relatives, never had many, if any, friends. She spent her childhood being treated as an annoyance at best and a burden at worst, to the point where, despite being sold to this skeletal mage, she gives him her loyalty because he was simply the first to ever offer her a home, the first to call her family. It's an incredibly sad moment from the first episode that doesn't even get into the depth of her character. Chise is what the series calls a sleighbaggy, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. It's a designation given to humans who have the ability to naturally absorb magical energy. But because of this, they are extremely valuable, both by magical sorcerers and fey creatures alike. However, they are rare. Not because they don't appear often enough in the world, but rather because when they do appear, they don't live for very long. The sheer amount of additional magical energy puts a massive strain on their bodies, and in the case of Chise, a decent portion of the series is relegated to attempts just to mitigate that by Elias and others so that she can live a longer lifespan. But it's an internal struggle for her character as well. Depression is not a fun topic. It doesn't do good things to people. So to have a character so close to death at every moment, one who starts off by being pretty apathetic to continuing to live at all is... well, to say that it's sad doesn't really have the right kind of gravity to it. Had things gone a different way at the start of the story, if Elias was not the one to buy her, if she was sold off into far worse circumstances, I'm willing to bet that she would have welcomed it all the same. The Chise at the start of the story is tired, far too tired for someone of her age, racked by trauma and a lack of any urgency to actually live. But living with Elias is not enough to change her by itself. Even several episodes in, she seems perfectly willing to accept a series of events that will no doubt lead to her death. She almost welcomes it. She's been in that place before, a place where you almost want to know what it feels like to jump off a building and fly, even for just the few seconds that you get to. Chise's story over the course of the series is not something that I would call healing. But for someone who has been in similar situations, there is a level of understanding here that can't be overstated. Chise's pain is not something that will heal in a few quick storylines, regardless of how much magic exists in this world. There is no magic fix for her mental state. You can't just wish away the kind of self-loathing and depression that Chise has come to accept within herself at the start of the series. But for the viewer, it does provide a good bit of hope, even if we don't have the same kind of help that she does. But of course, one of Magus's bride's strengths is that Chise receiving help is not what makes the story worth watching, especially if that help in the form of Elias isn't all that helpful at all. But rather, it's how Chise is able to develop and grow despite the challenges placed before her, and how she attempts to overcome her self-loathing and become an entirely different character. Her journey is the one worth watching, dark spots and all. Despite, however, being the character named in the title and the one whose story is absolutely the main reason why this series is worth experiencing, it is not the only thing that the series has to offer. Baked into this world is a whole slew of real-world mythology and folklore. The story takes place in Europe for a reason, a place where a massive amount of mythical creatures call home, and most of them become quite interested in the fact that a slave Aggie moved in nearby. But in addition to how the story deals with Chise and Elias's personal stories and their relationship, the lore of the world leans on stories that are not black and white. Many creatures of the Fae have never really been portrayed as a kind of pitch-black evil, usually instead being a kind of playful, mischievous gray. Their wants and desires may sometimes align with our characters, offering them the use of their magic, and other times their motives may be counter, wanting to use Chise's nature for their own ends. You don't need a degree in Celtic folklore to appreciate the references either, though I'm sure that if you had one, that would help and you'd notice far more. There are plenty of more obvious references as well, pulled from, among other things, the work of Shakespeare, having the likes of the fairy king and queen from Midsummer's Night's Dream, or even the fairy Ariel from The Tempest. But there's also banshees and dragons, each with their own aspects to them that help the story along in little ways. But they just give the world that additional layer of mystery and depth to make it even more interesting. From a production standpoint as well, the entire narrative is helped along by the show's animation team, and in my eyes, the equally important soundtrack. Most of the clips that I've been showing so far should give you a taste of what the team at Wit Studio came up with, showing that despite the massive popularity of their more action-focused titles, they can handle this more subtle kind of storytelling just as well visually. It's also worth noting the strength behind the show's director, as prior to this he had only directed a small OVA and the film for Yowamushi Pedal, a series that's already well established. But the director's chair is a place he hasn't spent all that much time in, something that I found surprising considering just the level of quality in the show's directing. But it looks like he was able to take past experiences and use them to help his work now. Like, who better to direct a series about a character who suffers from massive amounts of depression than a guy who did animation directing, key animation, and general designs for Welcome to the NHK. On the musical end, there are two things worth mentioning. First, the compositions by the show's composer. Noteworthy for not simply how fitting they are to the narrative, but also for the fact that, like the show's director, the composer hasn't done much outside of this project. It's like a combination of things that would have made me really worried about the show going into it. A director rarely in the hot seat, and a composer with no other anime to his name? Color me surprised, then, when this OST for Magus Bride ends up becoming something that I find myself listening to on its own regularly. It's not something that happens for many a soundtrack, I'll tell you that. Second is the show's use of insert songs. Now, most shows as of late don't use insert songs as much as animes of years past, and occasionally those that do don't use them all that well. I'm of course giving a side eye to Shinkai here. But the insert songs for Magus Bride are phenomenal, with well-chosen vocalists that add to the scenes that they are used in. And don't get me started on the music picked for the show's opening. It's just fantastic. Magus Bride is a series that I have such a passion for. Like, the only reason that I didn't rally for it harder back when it came out was because it sort of shared a release year with what is now my current favorite anime ever, Made in Abyss. Also, that it came out at that odd time that was half 2017, half 2018. So, like, when doing a best of year list, it feels like it belongs to both, and at the same time, neither, which made it really hard to push for it like I have with others in the past. It's also just a matter of how personal the show feels to me. Like, I can praise it all I want, and I have, but I can also understand that the main reason I love it so much is for how much I can relate experiences in my own life with Chise as a character. Something that, while I'm sure others have experienced, might not be as noteworthy to someone who hasn't been in a similar place. It's not a perfect series, and there are aspects to it that I think could have been done better or done slightly differently, but I can't help but love it nonetheless. As such, with all of that in mind, I am happy to give Ancient Magus' Bride the Class Reflection rating of Certified Frosty. A rating for only the best of the best, and those shows too important to ignore. I realize that it's probably too high praise for most people, and I can't say that it's not without flaws, but since I personally found so much entertainment out of this series, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving it anything less. There will be streaming links down in the description for you to check out, which I think obviously you should. And for alternate anime recommendations, well, we'll start with another series about a red-headed protagonist, and I'll point you towards Snow White with the red hair. Not actually related to the more well-known story of Snow White, there are no dwarves here, or witches, though there are poisoned apples, various princes, and a well-developed lead character who navigates her way through this quite lovely fantasy world. It's not an isekai either, in case that's something that you happen to be worried about. Lastly, a very special thank you to my patrons, who not only support my work in general, but allow me to continue to do what I do. I love and appreciate you all. Specifically though, as I like to do, I want to give particular shoutouts to patrons: Wago221, Calhoun Boy, Hector Montemayor, Rune Jacobson, Ryfin Bonaparte, and City Yamako for being especially awesome. You guys are great. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty.